In this lesson, we'll talk about HSL curves, as HSL curves allow for precise and creative color grading. And we'll be working with this Canon clip. These are my project settings, exactly the same as for all other lessons. And my input color space is set to Canon Cinema Gamut Canon Look 2, as this is how this clip was shot. And here on the first note, I've only adjusted the exposure a little bit. This is before and after. Then at the very end, I did a little bit of sharpening. Let me zoom in to show you. This is before and after, and I did it by going to blur and by decreasing the blur radius. So I went from 0.50 to 0.46. And then I have put all HSL curves names separately as parallel nodes, and I will be going through all of them in a second. So let's go to our curves. And here first we have our custom curves that you have familiarized yourself with before. So let's move on to hue versus hue, and let's select our hue versus hue node. And basically, when I drag my curve up and down, I'm able to change the hue of any color of the clip, like this. But we can also do it selectively. So here, if I want to change the hue of the sky, and in order to select only the hue of the sky, I can simply click on it, on the clip, and then a point will appear on my curve, and I can modify it. So I can move it up and down. I will move it up then. So this way, I would change the color of the sky from blue to more of a teal blue, like this. It's a little bit quirky. And this is before and after. So it already changes how our clip looks quite significantly. Then I can, for example, select the green color of the trees over here, and I can do the same. I can change the hue of the trees. We can make them look more green or more yellow, like this. And now let's move on to another node, that is our hue versus saturation. And here we'll be adjusting the saturation of the selected hue. So here let's focus on this red sleeve, as I think it's a bit overly saturated. So we can basically fix it with this curve. So let's select it. And now down here, let's push this point down a bit. And look what happened. This is before and after. A huge difference. Now let's move on to hue versus luminance. And here we can adjust the luminance of the selected hue. So when we move the curve up, the whole clip gets brighter, and when we move it down, it gets darker. So let's select the sky color again to create a point on the curve. And now when I move my point up, the sky gets very bright, and when I move it down, it gets darker. And I will maybe darken it a bit as I prefer it. Now let's move to the luma versus saturation. And here we can increase or decrease the saturation of the shadows, midtones, or highlights separately. So when I push this curve down on the very left, I will desaturate my clips in the shadows, like this. Let's reset it. And when I do it on the right, I will desaturate my clip in the highlights. And here what I will do, I will create an additional point in the midtones, and I will push it up just a touch. Then I will decrease the saturation in the shadows and the highlights a bit. And this is before and after. A very, very tiny difference, but decreasing the saturation in the shadows and highlights make the image look more natural, in my opinion. Now let's move on to the saturation versus saturation. And this curve allows us to decrease or increase the saturation depending on the saturation on the image in the shadows, midtones, and highlights. This is how it works. So here again, I will decrease the saturation of the most saturated parts of the clip in the shadows and highlights, and we can increase them in the midtones. And now let's move on to the last HSL curve called saturation versus luma. And here we can increase or decrease the luminance depending on the saturation of the clip. And it works like this. So I will maybe just decrease it a tiny bit in the highlights, and I will push it up in the midtones. And this is before and after. Again, just a slight difference. Sometimes it's all about very, very subtle changes. And this is our clip before using HSL curves and after. In this lesson, we will be focusing on the color warper tool in Resolve, and I will be showing you how it works with this Sony Cine S-Log free clip. So let's find the best frame to work on. And then on my first note, I have already performed the basic color correction. I have just improved the exposure a bit. This is before and after. And I am using the same color management settings as usual. So now let's move straight to our color warper. And basically, the difference between the color warper and the HSL curves is that the color warper allows to adjust the hue and the saturation of the clip at the same time. And as you remember from the previous lesson, when using HSL curves, we have to do it all separately. And then we also have here a chroma luma warper that allows us to change the chroma, that is a purity of the color, and the luminance at the same time. But let's go back to the hue saturation color warper, and let's hit Option S to create a new node, and let's just call it color warper. Then we can, for example, select a certain hue on the clip. So I will select red over here. And then this hue will be highlighted on our color warper, so we can see exactly where our color from the clip is positioned. We can also change the hue and the saturation by simply dragging the mouse over the clip, and also look how our color warper changes when we are doing this. But now let's reset it. And we can also change the size and the position of our color warper, clicking here, and we can place it wherever we want to. Then over here we can add more rows to our color warper if we want to be more precise, and we can also add more rings to it. I usually pick 12 rows and 6 rings. This is enough for my needs. And then this yellow line over here is a skin indicator. So it tells us where usually skin tones should be placed. Then I will move my mouse somewhere on the clip and it will show me the right point on the grid. Then I'll move it onto the white color. So it will show me that the white is exactly in the middle of the grid, and so on. So take some time to familiarize yourself with it. Then here on the right, we have a bunch of different tools we can use. So this is a simple select and deselect tool. So we can select a certain point with it and we can move it around like this. Then we have a draw selection tool. So let's grab it and let's draw a line over the multiple points we want to select. And then also we can move all of them around to change the saturation by moving it the opposite direction from the center, and to change the hue by moving it left or right, like this. Then we have a pin the pin tool, and we can use it to pin some points on our grid so they don't move. So for example, I will select multiple points around this one. And then I can grab my select tool again, and when I move my selected point around, the points that are pinned will not change the position at all. So we can be more selective with our hue by doing this. Then we have a pull point tool, so let's select it. And when I click multiple times on the center point, for example, all of the other points are moving towards the grid, desaturating the image. And then next to it, we have a push point tool. And when I select it, and I click multiple times on a middle point, all of other points on the grid will be pushed away from it, increasing the saturation. So now let's reset it. Then we have increase and decrease fall off points. So when you select some points on the grid, and when you click the plus button, it will add additional points nearby. Or when you click the minus button, that will remove the additional points. Then we have the invert selection tool. So in this case, when we don't have any points selected, when we hit it, it will select them all. Then we have convert selected to pin tool. So when we select a certain point on the grid, and when we hit convert selected to pin, it will convert our selected point to the pin. Then we have select pin column. So when we select a point and we pick this option, it will select the whole column this point belongs to. Then we have select pin ring. So when we select it, it will highlight and select the whole ring that belongs to our point. And then we'll be able to move it around like this. Then we also have select pin all and deselect the pin all. And I think this is self-explanatory. And at the end, we have the reset button. Then we can also use the range slider to select the hue points on the color warper. But let's reset it. And now we can also select a point on our warper, and we can use the hue, saturation and luma slider to shift the chosen color. So as you can see, there's multiple helpful tools to play around with. Now let's go to the chroma and luma grids, and here we have two more grids to work with. Now we have selected the grid number 2, so when I click on the hue on my clip and I move my mouse left to right, it will change the hue, adding red or green to it. And then when I change it to grid 1, I can change my hue, adding blue or yellow. And when I move it up and down, I'm changing my luminance, brightening or darkening a certain hue. But now let's reset it and let's go back to the hue, saturation, color warper. And let's make some subtle changes to the clip, as normally we don't change too much. So here, for example, I want to change this red hue a bit, and I want to take out a bit of the saturation from it. So just on the clip, I will click on the hue I want to modify, and I will move it towards green to make it look more orange, like this. And then I will also go to the Chroma Luma Color Warper, and here I want to dim a little bit these bright lights. So I will click on it and I will move my mouse down a bit to decrease the illuminance. And then with my Hue Saturation Warper, I will add a little bit of blue to the white, as now it has got a bit too much of the warm tint. Okay, and this is before and after. And this is my final result, but you feel free to experiment with the color warper as much as you want to. In this lesson, we will talk about power windows, and I will show you a few common ways of using them. Power windows enable precise and selective color correction and grading within specific areas of the video. This tool allows you to isolate regions in a shot and apply color corrections to those specific areas. It's particularly useful when you want to perform targeted adjustments, such as enhancing the exposure, changing the color, or adjusting the contrast of specific parts of the image. And here on the timeline, I have 3 different clips. The first one was shot in S-Log3, and then my 2 other clips were shot in Canon Log 2. And as I have some mixed clips on the timeline, I am using the same color management settings as I have shown you in the first module of this course. So let's move to the second clip. And here I've just very slightly improved the contrast and the exposure on the primaries node. This is before and after. So let's go ahead and let's create a new node. And let's label it as power windows. And now I will use my offset to change the overall tint of the shot, so you can see exactly how the power windows work. Okay, this will do. And now let's go to the power windows over here. And here we have all these different shapes to choose from. So this is a rectangular power window, and we can soften the edges of it manually. But we can also use our controls over here to do so. So we can increase the size of the power window, then we can change the aspect of it, then we can tilt it or pan it, then we can rotate it, and also we can change the opacity like this. And then we've got our softness controls as well. Then we've got a round power window. Then we've got a polygon that we can modify like this. We can build any shape we want from it. Then we have a custom shape, so we can create our own shape with it. And then we have a gradient that we can soften like this. Then over here, we can also add multiple shapes. So I'll add a few circles and I will place them over my clip. And now when we click on this button over here, we can reverse it, which means that in this case, everything outside this power window will be affected, not everything inside it. And then we can also disable the power window over here, like this. And then in case we have multiple power windows, we can, for example, reverse one of them, and then we can disable the other. And this way we'll be able to manipulate everything outside our power windows. But now let's just move on to some real life examples. So first, I will show you how to isolate the sky with power windows and how to improve it, as this is something I come across at work very often, that the sky is a bit overexposed and it looks dull. So in this case, I will grab a custom power window and I will draw a mask around my sky. And now let's turn the highlight mode on so we can see our selection properly. And I will also soften my mask over here. It's always better to soften the mask. And this shot is not a moving shot, but we usually deal with moving shots, so we usually have to track our masks. So let's go to the tracker and let's track it forwards and backwards. Perfect. Now let's go back to the primary wheels, and the first thing I can see is that the sky is quite bright, and that's why it looks quite uninteresting. So let's go to gamma and let's push it down a bit. Okay, and maybe let's push gain down a bit as well. Okay, and my sky automatically looks better. This is before and after. We have added a way more definition to it. And now another thing we can do is to go here to the color warper, and we can use it to increase the saturation of the sky easily. So I can just do it on the whole image with my mouse, like this. And this is before and after. A huge difference. Now let's move to this clip. And here I have also already adjusted the exposure and the balance. And here I want to show you a very simple technique I use very often to bring the attention to the main subject. So let's go ahead and let's create a new node and let's label it as power windows as well. And here I will grab a rectangle power window and I will place it at the bottom of my clip, like this. Then I will soften it, and I will turn the highlight mode on to be able to see exactly what I'm doing. This should work. So now let's just turn the highlight mode off. And then here I will decrease the gain a bit, not too much, just to darken the bottom part of the shot. And this is before and after. And look how much attention we have brought to the protagonists with this very, very simple trick. Now we can also take one step further and we can create the outside node that will basically invert the alpha transparency of the node that precedes it. Therefore, adjustments in an outside node affect the opposite area of the previous node. So let's right click on the Power Windows node and let's go to Add Node and then Add Outside. And when we turn the highlight mode on, we can see that this is exactly the same mask as we have created before, but it's inverted. So now I'll go to my curves. Then I'll create a point in the middle of the curve to be able to manipulate the midtones. And I will push it up just a tiny bit to add more brightness in the midtones. And this is before adding the power windows and after. Again, a huge difference. Now let's move to this Sony clip. And here I have also already performed some basic adjustments. This is before and after. And here we'll focus more precisely on the face of our model. So let's create a new node. And I will grab a round power window and I will place it over the face. Then I will soften it and I will adjust the size. And this shot is moving quite a lot, so let's track it. And here I want to precisely brighten the face of the model, and it's best to do it by combining the power windows with the qualifier, as this will give us more defined result. So let's go to the qualifier and let's draw over the skin. Now let's turn the highlight mode on to be able to see the selection. And now I will use my sliders to refine the selection. So I will start from the hue, shrinking it a bit. Then let's soften it. Now let's adjust the luminance. And let's soften it. And now I will also blur my selection and I will denoise it. Okay, let's play it. Looks good to me. And here what we will do is that we'll go to the primary wheels and we'll push the gamma up a bit. Like this. And look at the difference. This is before and after. This way we have basically added more brightness to some selected parts of the skin, making it look more sculpted. And we also very often use power windows to create vignettes. So I will create another node and I will call it vignette. And here I will grab a rectangular power window and I'll make it bigger. Then I will turn my highlight mode on. Then I will increase the softness. And then let's reverse our power window as we want to adjust the outside of the mask, not the inside. And let's turn the highlight mode off. And then let's go to curves again. And here I will push my white curve down a bit in the midtones. And this is our before and after. I hope you've learned a lot about power windows.